Welcome, listeners and viewers far and wide, from the Outback to Inwood. I'm Eirik Gislason, Associate Broker and Team Leader of the Excelsior team at Brown Harris Stevens, Master Certified Negotiation Expert and Instructor, founder of Archway Partners Coaching, and your host of Shear Negotiation Mastery, the podcast bound and determined to reclaim and restore the good name of negotiation and unlock the door to value creation, win-win solutions, and the true power of collaboration and integrative negotiation. All right, so the year is, well, it's the early 70s, let's say that. Texas, and the commuter airline market is brutal. Cutthroat routes between Dallas, Houston, and San Antonio, known as the Texas Triangle, where business travelers dominated the manifests and every carrier was fighting for relevance. Braniff International Airways, if you remember them, they were the established powerhouse. Flashy planes, high-profile ads, deep pockets, and then there was Southwest Airlines. They were the newcomer, small, untested, and easy to dismiss. So Braniff decided to push the little upstart out of business with a price war. They slashed their fares in half from a walloping $26 to $13 one way. They were confident that Southwest would have to follow suit and certainly could not match that price cut for long and would go out of business. But enter Herb Kelleher, Southwest's unconventional and wildly perceptive CEO. Herb understood something that Braniff missed. The business travelers on those routes weren't paying for their own tickets. Their companies were. Lower fares didn't matter to them. The experience did. So instead of cutting prices, Southwest held the line at $26 and offered something completely different. Not a bag of peanuts or a bag of pretzels or even one of those biscuit cookies that you get on Delta Airlines. No, a free bottle of liquor. Your own choice of scotch, vodka, gin, or bourbon with every flight. For the cost of a few dollars, it was like $4 or $5, they bought the liquor in bulk. Southwest created an incentive that felt personal, fun, and valuable, and travelers loved it. The promotion became a hit, and in fact, meanwhile, Braniff's strategy was backfiring. They lost more money trying to compete on price, while Southwest built loyalty, attention, and brand identity. Herb had reframed the battlefield from cost to perceived value. It wasn't about being cheaper. It was about benefits over cost. As negotiators, what can we take away from that story? Well, there are several, but I'll name a few. One, negotiate and compete on value, not price. Discounting is easy. Delivering meaningful, differentiated benefits is what creates actual value. Number two, identify the decision maker. The real buyer isn't always the one paying. Discover who experiences the value and solve for what matters most to them. And three, redefine the playing field. When the other side tries to determine the most valuable elements of the deal, ask questions first and gather intel first. Then move the negotiation where your strengths create advantage. And that's just the beginning of what we're unlocking today on Shearline. And joining me for this unique and powerful episode is my trusted part-time co-host and longtime friend. You know him as Mr. Cookie Salad, celebrated interior designer of Jay Billiet Interiors, Mr. Jay Billiet.
Thank you.
Welcome back, Jay.
Thank you, Eirik.
It's great to have you back. It's been a while.
It does feel like it's been a while.
It has. Well, I've gone through a few episodes, and every time I'm like,
haven't
when is
listened
Jay
to a single one.
Thanks. They were really good.
I'm sure. I mean, I can imagine they're really good when I'm not on.
Yeah, I was wondering. I was just looking for your little thumb, your little like, and it just never came. But
it didn't?
Okay. No, I didn't. I didn't see your little thumbs up on my YouTube channel, but that's okay. Maybe next time.
Yeah. I didn't know you could like things on YouTube, actually.
You can thumb it up.
Oh,
I don't know if it's called a like, but it's a thumb.
Okay.
So what have you been up to?
I have been up to the exact same thing I was up to 2 months ago, a month ago.
Yeah, getting to go to the gym while I take care of my children. I think that was where we left it.
Oh.
You get to have Father's Day, I get to eat copious amounts of food, and you get to go to the gym and
and walk a dog.
Yourself.
Yeah.
It's nice.
Yeah, I get quiet time.
So we learned recently that you and I, I know at some point we've shared barbers throughout over a long
For
period
longer
of time.
than we even knew, we shared barbers.
Yeah.
And this came up
right.
recently because you called me and asked me for a reference for a barber. And
Yes.
I said, what are you talking about? I have your barber,
That's
and
right.
he just moved. I need a new barber. We both need a new barber.
Yeah, I forgot that I had referred you to
You
my,
had referred,
to
because
my barber.
it started probably, I mean, with George. We could say his name. He's not listening, but it started with George,
in the
over
story.
20 years ago.
Yeah.
Because I remember I was seeing him, and you asked me for who cuts my hair, and I told you to go to George.
which was like right around the corner from my house at the time.
It was right around the corner.
Amazing.
Yeah, because you lived at Broadway.
Yeah.
And so we went there, and then he ended up moving to California. And I went
Suspiciously.
somewhere else, and then I needed someone, and I called you, and you said, "Oh, I go to George's brother." So then I started going to George's brother, and then you moved, and I stayed with George's brother until he moved to Florida. And then when I moved to Jackson Heights,
moved to Florida. Yeah.
and so I was with Alex until then, and then a few years ago, you referred me to
Manny.
to Manny.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then Manny just recently, Forest Hills Barbershop, great.
He just
Up and disappeared. And now
he moved. He started a business with his. Did you know that?
No.
He started a business with his aunt in the Dominican Republic. That's where he's from. And so he went back there to.
So now we're on the hunt for another.
So now
barber.
we're both on the hunt. So if anyone
So
has any
if you know any good
suggestions-
barbers in the
Shear line.
Central Queens area.
Call it. We'll be accepting callers.
Yeah, we'll be accepting calls.
Feel free to call in.
And
if you have
it
any good
ties right in
suggestions.
because, as Ben Willig said when he came on the podcast, he's like, I thought I was coming on to a podcast about haircuts. This
Yeah,
Shear line-
well, that's what this should be. This should be a podcast about
No, it shouldn't,
referrals.
Jay. No, it shouldn't.
Okay.
All right. So let's get back to it. Today,
Okay.
we're going to do something a little different. And I love doing something a little different on Shearline when Jay is here. We get to mix it up a little bit. And it's honestly something that I've been really looking forward to on the podcast. So in honor of Jay's triumphant return, we're going to flip our usual format on its head. So normally, each episode of Shearline zeroes in on one specific topic or theme, something like adaptability, logic, and reasoning, conflict avoidance, power, confidence, all of these episodes that you didn't watch. and we unpack how those concepts apply to collaborative negotiation. But today, we're going to take a reverse approach. We're calling this episode This One Deal? So
Yes, we're calling it This One Deal, and I love that we have to, flip the script every time I'm here because I do not have the ability to follow any rules or structure.
Yeah.
And so we're going to do exactly what you said. Instead of starting with the theme of the day, we're going to chat about our life experiences.
Yeah.
True life experiences, deals that we've had or that maybe other people have had, and then we're going to pull the lessons out of those stories. And it's going to be the kind of deals that make you laugh. Probably mine. They'll all make you laugh, sweat, probably question your life choices. That's also me. And we'll pull the lessons out after how they have shaped the negotiations, negotiation tactics. So whether you're an interior designer, a real estate professional, a mortgage broker, an attorney, a buyer, a seller, a renter, or a landlord, you will definitely recognize yourself in these moments. You'll probably nod and say, oh yeah, I've been there.
I hope that's
Which is another reason why this is so fun, because we can share stories, it's like sitting around at a bar like, you're never going to believe what happened. And all the listeners are like, oh, that happened.
Yeah, this is actually
That happened to
a
me.
good friend of mine who I grew up in real estate with. His name is Brian Meese. So Brian, if you're watching, we always used to have this joke. We would say, "Oh, this one deal I did," and then we would say this one deal, and it would 10 or 15 minutes later we'd be on to the next deal and the next deal. So we all share these similar stories. So this is going to be fun.
It happens.
Yeah. Well, I think we might as well start. First story. We'll start with you.
Yes, I'm happy to go first.
All right.
And so I was in real estate.
Should we name it? I'm gonna give it a name.
My deal?
Yeah. Can I?
Yeah, you can give it a name.
We're calling this one the 8-person dining table.
We can call this one the 8-person
Okay.
dining table.
All right, go ahead. I'm
So,
sorry.
and this was when I had first started in real estate. I was dealing with rental units, and you don't start out with like huge, it's not a 5-bedroom, in a high rise. We're looking for a 1-bedroom near a hospital, and it was. So I was still very new, but I went through all the list of questions you're supposed to ask every new client. And so I start with
why do you want to live near a hospital?
Yeah, well, so they were both doctors.
Oh,
that was an important thing. So,
sense.
and it came down to asking the clients, what are your needs versus what are your wants? What do you have to have and what do you hope you have? And which of these things are negotiable and which ones are not?
Yeah.
And so we were going through the list, and one of the things was they have to be near this hospital because they both work there. And I said, well, yeah, I mean, you're a doctor and you're on call. I want you to be near the hospital as well. And one of the items on their list was a dining table for 8, and it actually was bigger, but when it was extendable, but in its smallest size, it sat 8 people. And they said, we have to have that. And I said, so you're doctors, you're not home a lot, what, for Thanksgiving? And they said they had just gotten married and they had registered for this dining table. They didn't think they'd get it, and they got it, and it was beautiful, and they didn't want to put it in storage.
Wow.
And they, and I had been in interior design already at the time, and so they happened to get a designer who said, I will make that happen, because I understand, I understand the love of furniture, but also they said it was expensive. We don't want to pay to store it. We want to display it. So long story short, it became, it was one of my most difficult searches, because back then, I don't even know if now you see floor plans for every single apartment before you go to see them.
You think you would? No, you don't.
You don't. Yeah. And so to make a long story kind of short, we walked into this apartment that was in the perfect neighborhood. The price was workable. And we had seen a lot of stuff prior to this where I was like, it's not going to work. It's not going to work. And we walked into this apartment, and I knew immediately that this was their apartment. I just knew immediately. I mean, first of all, it had arches and a step-down living room, and you know how I feel about that. I was like, I would live
Jay
in this
loves a
apartment.
sunken living room.
I love a sunken living room. And there was a little kitchen and a little dining area outside the kitchen, and we spent a few minutes in the apartment, and I said, this is where you need to live. And they said, we like it, but that dining area isn't really big enough. And I said, don't put your table there. And they said, well, you have to put the table there. And I said, no, the thing is you don't. Like right now there's a pendant fixture there that's saying put the dining table there. Nix that pendant, get a different light fixture, you stage that differently. And in this living area, which is big, I told them, I just laid out the whole thing. I said, this is where you put your dining table. It's still plenty of room for a living area. And it took some, I don't want to say convincing, but it took some selling. Like I really had to lay it out for them to see it. And then when they saw it, there was no question. There was absolutely no question. They knew that it was their apartment. And I was thrilled.
You did the same thing for us. When you designed our apartment, there were certain things where it's like, oh, this is where this should naturally go. And you're like, no, it doesn't. It doesn't have to. And you don't have to use the dining area, this little tiny dining area, as the dining area. You've got plenty of, and I love that. And the fact that there's so many great takeaways from that idea that you listen to the client, and as opposed, I think there's some agents who will hear a request like that and they're like, what is wrong with you? You cannot bring an 8-person dining table to New York City. Get rid of it, and try to convince them that this thing that's important to them is not really that important, or is not acceptable, or it's not possible.
Right.
And I love that you were like, okay, let's figure it out. What is a want? What is a need? And then let's move forward with what you need.
And this is one thing that, I mean, maybe it was just me, but I loved that challenge. I loved the fact that every single apartment I went in, I had to try to solve this puzzle for them. And we've all, look, you get people who want a studio apartment with an eat-in gourmet kitchen. And you're like, well, they don't make apartments like that for obvious reasons. Like you might get an eat-in kitchen, but it's also a watch TV in kitchen, sleep in kitchen,
shower in
it's
kitchen.
a shower in kitchen. So it was a great challenge. But another thing that really worked in my favor was they trusted me. Like when I said to them, I said, I make you no promises, but I promise that you're in good hands.
Yeah.
And I promise I'm going to do everything I can to get you everything you want, plus this dining table. And we did it.
trust is obviously going to come back as a theme over and over and over in this podcast. And it's interesting. I was just talking to my team today, and we're having a conversation about that moment when you lay out the options for your client, and you walk them down. These are the options that we have. They get to make the decision. It's their choice. We empower them to make the choice, but there are options. And when you provide them the options and they trust you, they're more willing to go, okay, this is the world of options that I have. Now I'm going to make a choice based on these options because I trust the person who's providing the options to me. And I think that is so sometimes overlooked as a negotiator or as a real estate professional, that when we have that level of trust, we have that power of influence and persuasion, not to manipulate, but to help our clients come to a decision. Right. Yeah, that's beautiful. And then there's one other thing that I loved about this, and that was the idea of listening to their priorities. And I mentioned, like, you didn't say, oh, that's just, that's crazy, you shouldn't bring your dining room table. But having them kind of list their priorities so you know how to navigate what is and is not something that needs to be a part of this search. Because sometimes the client doesn't, like you said, sometimes the client doesn't see it. They're not able to see the possibilities, or they're not able to see the workaround or the solution.
They're not going to see that solution because they haven't been in enough apartments to know. They're trusting the professional. Yeah. They're trusting the professional.
I love it. That's a great one to kick off with. So we're going to take a break, and we're going to come right back with a few more stories.
Residential and commercial closings to litigation, Romer DeBoss is your full-service real estate law firm. We blend big firm knowledge with boutique-level attention, delivering outcomes that exceed every expectation. Contact us at romerdeboss.com.
Looking to stage a property but on a tight budget and timeline? Stage with Stage and Fold. Stylish, lightweight, foldable, 3D printed cardboard furniture that looks real. Quick delivery and easy assembly. Staging starts at just $199 a month per room, and setup takes less than 30 minutes. Contact us today to stage smarter, sell faster, save thousands with Stage and Fold.
All right, and we are back. All right, so I'm going to tell the next story, and I like to call this one the Park Slope Brownstone. Now, this is actually a story that one of my negotiation students brought to me several years ago, and I love it so much that I include it in a lot of the coaching that I do. So here's the bullet points of this story. So this woman was a new agent at the time that this happened. She had been in the business for maybe 6 months, and she was door knocking. She had decided that she lived in Park Slope. She was trying to get a foothold, and obviously there are a lot of agents in that neighborhood, a lot of agents with experience, and that corner a lot of that market. So she decided that she wanted to be a part of that townhouse market. And so she went out and started door knocking, and one day she saw this older man sitting on a stoop. And so she went up and she gave him her card and introduced herself and started having a conversation with him. And it turned out that of all of the people that she knocked on doors, didn't get responses, people that she did talk to or just kind of shoot her away, this man was like, I am thinking about selling my home. And so she was, she's now got a viable seller in front of her. And so she just kept on listening. And very quickly, the conversation turned to this man's wife, who had recently passed away. So the reason he was thinking about selling is his kids had grown up in this brownstone. They had the whole brownstone, and it was just him and his wife, empty nesters, and then she passed away. So now it's just him in this brownstone, and he was ready to move on. But he had a problem, and that was that he was really concerned about honoring the legacy and memory of his wife. And the reason was, so he kept on telling her this story, and he kept on explaining to her that in this 1980s, 70s or 80s, like 50 years earlier, his wife made the determination that she really wanted to purchase this brownstone in Park Slope. And at the time, everybody was telling her, this is a mistake, this isn't the neighborhood you should purchase in, it's too much, all of these things. But she was strong enough and bold enough to kind of shoo away the voices and make the purchase. And so they made that purchase and ended up, raising their family there. The neighborhood changed around them. And he had been pitched by many agents. So people had stopped by, people had sent him postcards, people had pitched him on selling the house, but no one ever took the time to just listen to what was important to him. It wasn't about price. Like, he really wasn't concerned. And now this brownstone's worth over $2 million at that point, right? So she bought it for less than $100,000. It's now worth more than $2 million. And his primary objective in the sale of this house was to honor his wife. And she did that. She listened, she heard it, she brought in his story into the narrative of their story, so that he understood that when she took this listing, whether she had experience or not, whether she had 10, 20 years of experience or 6 months of experience, did not matter to this man. What mattered was the person that took this on was going to do right by his wife. And she got that listing. And when she told the story to me, she was now in the business for several years and had done several townhouse listings in Park Slope or in Brooklyn since, because that became something that garnered yet another listing and another listing. And it just goes to show you this idea that the pitch is not always about price. And it's so important that we hear and listen to our clients and actually actively listen, so that we understand what they want out of a deal.
Yeah, there's so many important points in there. And the first one, like you said, is it's not always about money. Like, it's also about the experience. I mean, even her listening to that story, incorporating it in the ad, or incorporating it every time she showed that house, meant the world to that man. Yeah. It didn't matter the price. You know, that has to do with that man's emotional connection to what was there, and her respecting his connection to it and establishing a relationship with him, so that he knows that she was going to honor it. Yeah,
and that at that moment, he could trust that no matter what happened, no matter where the house sold, that she was doing the most important thing that he wanted through that transaction. Yeah, and he could feel at peace with that as well, which is amazing. And you know, we talk about storytelling. We had a whole episode that you didn't watch on storytelling. But one of the things that's amazing about storytelling, or that's important about storytelling, is one thing for us to be able to tell the story and to tell a story well, and to bring, to create some sort of imagery or metaphor that shines a light on something that our client doesn't necessarily understand or know, nor to bridge that gap, all of that. But what's even more impactful than our story is eliciting the story from our client, so that we understand the story that they're telling themselves, and then we can put ourselves into that story with them. And that she did beautifully.
She did. She retold that man's story very respectfully. Yeah. And honestly, that, speaking of, referrals, haircut referrals, that's the kind of experience that people refer, right? Yeah. You don't just march in and sell someone's house and you get maybe you do, and someone says, well, they did it really fast, so use them. Yeah. But it's much more likely someone's going to say, I had an amazing experience with this woman. She listened to me, she respected my story, she told my story well, and it was, and honestly, that's what that man needed, just to get through that process. Yeah. So she respected him. Yep. And that's what gets you more business. And like you said, she's doing very well now. So
yeah, and that, I guess that's one of the other, it's not necessarily fits into the negotiation narrative, but it's certainly the business building narrative, which is what we do when we create relationships, and when we have that trust that we keep coming back to, is it's an exponent. It creates more and more business. And when you go from, and we talk about this idea of being transactional versus relational, and when you have that mindset, when you approach your clients in that relationship or relational mindset, that begets more business. Is when people start to refer you to the next person and the next, and your business starts growing from that one deal. Yeah. So, yeah.
But I do think it does have a lot to do with negotiation as well, because I think even when you were helping me purchase, knowing the story of the woman. I mean, that seller's agent did a good job.
Yeah.
She said, this is her story. This is where she lived. This is why we're not going to go down in price. And it wasn't demanding, but it's helpful when you know where that agent, where that seller is coming from and why.
The context.
It can change the whole tone of a negotiation.
Absolutely.
If you are sensitive to that, which you should be.
Which you should be.
Which you should be.
That's great. All right, let's go back to you. What do you got?
So my first story was my favorite client ever. And so now this is probably, I don't want to say my least favorite client ever, because I'm sure they're probably a good person, but it was my least favorite experience in real estate.
Nice.
And so
That's nice.
this was also at the beginning, and it was for a rental apartment. And I had a young woman looking for a studio apartment in Hell's Kitchen, and I went through the list of what she needed, what she didn't need, her needs versus her wants. And they were, all of the topics that we discussed were what you would typically discuss with someone moving to a studio apartment in Hell's Kitchen: safety, all of these things. And as we started our tour and we started looking at apartments, she was asking all the right questions. But what I picked up on was she was responding to all of my wrong answers. It was the opposite of everything that I expected. She was asking about access to the building. Is there just this one door? And I would say, yeah, there's just this one door with the lock. So, but don't worry, the super's on site. And she'd be like, oh, where is he? And I would say, oh, he's downstairs. And she would ask, is he here a lot? It was just the opposite of everything.
Yeah, she wanted the building that had no locks.
She was fine with just one key. Like, she didn't want two keys, just one key. One door was fine. It had to be on the first or second floor, which is common for a lot of people. But the reasons, I just got this feeling in my gut that something was wrong. And so we had found this apartment that she wanted to apply for. And so I went back to the office and I was doing the paperwork, and I just couldn't let go of this feeling. So I just had a hunch. I Googled her phone number, and she probably wouldn't make the same mistake today, but her phone number was attached to 3 or 4 Airbnbs in Hell's Kitchen. And so she and then it started to make sense.
Exactly where I thought this was going.
No. Well, I didn't. I was hoping for something more exciting. I was like drugs, prostitution, like some crime. I know this is going to be a good story, but it didn't. But the sort of the dilemma. Maybe it's not a dilemma, but the issue I faced was that because we worked together at the time, our agency had an exclusive with that building. It was a small building, all studio apartments, kind of a mom and pop shop. And I was told at the very beginning, if you show an apartment here, they didn't come up much. If you show an apartment here, like, these are our people, we do right by them. And so now here I am faced with this person who is qualified, filling out paperwork, who I know is just going to have people in and out of this apartment every week, versus getting a deal done. And so for me, it kind of became, like a deal or no deal situation. Yeah. And I ended up calling her, and I told her that I wasn't going to be putting in her application. And I told her why, and she denied it. And I said, look, there's no denying what I found. And I said, I have a due diligence to this building. Yeah, we have a relationship with them. Like, I need to respect that. And I knew I can't suddenly have an Airbnb, they in their building, they would be livid. And then she continued to deny it until I told her, I was like, look, no matter what you say, I'm not going to do this. Yeah. And then she said to me, well, someone else is just going to rent me another apartment in Hell's Kitchen. And I said, that's fine. Yeah. I said, but it won't be me, and it won't be my reputation on the line, and it won't be, I won't give myself a bad name, and I will have protected this building, from an Airbnb coming in. It was very stressful at the time.
I bet. And the fact that it was, no one, especially early in your career, likes to lose a deal. And it's interesting because as real estate professionals, our integrity is so incredibly important because you are faced sometimes with this challenge of, do I move forward and collect the paycheck, or do I do the right thing? And we hope that we always do the right thing. It's integrity is what we do when no one else is watching, right? So that idea that you had a fiduciary responsibility to that landlord because the company had an exclusive with them and you were willing to give up the deal because of it.
Yeah.
Is interesting.
I mean, and I think I told you when we were initially kind of discussing this topic, I was so new. I hadn't even been paid yet. I was still running on empty in my real estate career, and you want to do deals so badly, and then here I am, 8:00 at night, sitting at my desk, essentially just throwing away a commission.
Yeah.
But I don't regret it. I definitely did the right thing. But it was. It's interesting because the first story I told, I listened to my clients and we had this very symbiotic relationship and we made it work.
Yeah.
And with this client, I listened. I also listened. I listened to everything she said, everything she asked, and I also listened to the things she didn't ask. And that's how I was able to put together, this is not going to end well.
Yeah.
There's no way it ends well. Either she leaves unhappy because I have to kind of abandon her as a client, or I upset my colleagues and my this landlord. So
this also makes me think, because this was at a time when agency disclosure didn't exist. Certainly the FAIR Act hadn't passed. Obviously that was recent. But it brings up this interesting idea about dual agency, because we had an exclusive with the landlord, but here you are taking out this renter to see apartments. But at that time, there's no exclusivity with a renter.
Right.
There was no agency relationship. There was an implied agency relationship, I guess. But it's interesting. I mean, it's years back, so now we can kind of talk about it.
Yeah, it was a long time ago.
But it brings up this idea of like, how do you play both sides of a deal? How can you successfully be a dual agent and carry out your fiduciary responsibility, the responsibility of reasonable care and loyalty to one client and not the other.
Right.
So it's kind of it's a really interesting story.
Yeah. And for the record, I do think Airbnb rules have changed since then. I think because of her, Airbnb rules have changed because of that scam.
Yeah.
But
you didn't fall victim to her scam though, Jay.
No, not me.
All right. Well, I'm going to come back. We're going to come back with another story. I call it the Fort Greene townhouse story.
Okay.
But we'll come back with that after a quick break.
What do you really need to know about buying or selling a home? First, it's serious business. And it's complicated. There's a lot of money on the table, and emotion too. You need an agent who knows the ropes. So, whether you're buying or selling your home, work with professionals who have a mastery of the craft.
I'm Brian Scott Cohen, one of the top loan originators in the country, and the #1 mortgage originator at Guaranteed Rate Infinity. Guaranteed Rate Infinity arguably has the most advanced tech in the industry. Our completely digital loan process makes it easy and efficient for homeowners, from a 15-minute pre-approval to the digital application and through closing. My team and I would love to help you get into the home of your dreams.
All right, and we are back. So now, this story is called the Fort Greene townhouse, and this is, I think, an amazing story about understanding relative value. So here we go. So imagine a gorgeous, fully renovated townhouse in Brooklyn, in Fort Greene, Brooklyn. It was on the market for $3.3 million, and the agent representing the buyer calls the listing agent, and it turns out that they had an accepted offer. And the accepted offer had been for about 14 days. It was longer than a normal accepted offer. So the agent started having a conversation with the listing agent, trying to get curious, trying to gain intel, asking a lot of questions, and through that conversation, drilled down on the fact that they were in contract, or they had accepted offer for around 3.2, so about $100,000 off the asking price. But it also became very clear in that conversation that the seller and the agent were really frustrated with the pending deal that they had going on. Apparently, the buyer had brought in multiple inspectors, didn't trust the first one, so brought in a second one. It became clear to the seller that they were going down a road where the buyer was going to start asking for discounts, was going to start to renegotiate that $3.2 million price based on the inspection. And this was a pristine townhome. I mean, it was gorgeous. And so there's a lot of, they renovated it. They spent years renovating this townhome. So not only is that buyer looking to discount, but psychologically, emotionally, they're like insulting their baby, right? And so they were all frustrated with this buyer, and the buyer's agent could pick up on that. So he asked the listing agent, so what would make the seller decide to move on to another buyer after knowing that they're in a very frustrated place? And she said, well, if you bring an offer that's at our asking price, we will happily kick this buyer to the side and move on to your buyer. And so the buyer's agent goes back to their client after that conversation and had information that was kind of conflicting, because the listing agent was saying that they were fed up with this buyer who they had accepted at 3.2, but then they were telling this new agent, if you come at 3.3, if you give us an extra $100,000, that's going to be what it takes for us to go with you. And so he had a conversation with his client, and they tried a different angle. So they went back to the listing agent. They said, look, here's what we'll do. We will offer you 3.2, or we'll offer you what you have. So we'll offer you the deal that you have right now, which is around 3.2. But instead of what you have right now, we will offer you $50,000 of appraisal protection, or of inspection protection. In other words, if our inspector goes in and finds something that's a $10,000 fix, or a $15,000 fix, or a $40,000 fix, or a $50 fix, all of that, all the way up to $50,000, you won't hear a peep from us. We will take on every single penny of it. We will have our inspector here tomorrow so that we can turn this around quickly. And we'll get into contract within 7 days. And if you give us a 7-day period, we promise you that we will be in contract. And didn't hurt that the buyer was all cash, but the buyer was cash, but we will get this done and we will close quickly. We'll take this burden off of your hands, this frustration off of your hands, because you don't even know where it's going at this point. It could come back. You have no idea what it's going to cost you. And every discount that the first buyer was going to ask for was going to be a chip off of 3.2. They're giving them 3.2 and then offering $50,000 of protection above that. They took the deal. They ended up having an inspection the next day. There was $5,000 of repairs total. That was all the inspector recommended, $5,000 of repairs. So the buyer ended up netting $95,000 just in the way that agent addressed that negotiation.
Yeah.
And I think that's fascinating.
Well, it's very smart. Number one, it kind of goes back to, it's not always about money, it's about the experience.
Yeah.
Like if they were happy with 3.2 but knew it was going to be a painful process, they wouldn't have done it. So why not go back in with the same number and say, let us show you we're serious. Let us show you that, let us better the experience. You'll get the same amount of money. In the end, they ended up ahead. But you'll get the same, we're offering you the same thing, but we're offering you a better experience.
Yeah.
And they took it.
Yeah, and the other thing that I think is missed sometimes is taking the opportunity to set down an anchor, taking an opportunity to make the negotiation more beneficial for your side, knowing that even if that seller had rejected that premise of 3.2 with $50,000 of inspection protection, everything that they offered was meant to protect and honor, or meant to provide the seller an experience, to your point, that was going to be better than what they had now. So even if they really did want their 3.3 price, the buyer's agent knew that we can present this offer, and they're not going to look at it as offensive. They're not going to look at it as anything but an attempt. And so what is there to lose to go in and try to make that negotiation save your client what amounts to a tremendous amount of money?
Tremendous amount.
I don't care if you're talking about a $5 million deal, a $3 million, or $100,000 is a lot of money. Yeah.
It's also smart. I mean, that agent was very smart in the way that they listened.
Yeah.
The way that they listened to what was actually holding up the process.
Yeah.
Because you can say, we're going to give you a better deal, and they say, okay, more money. But because that agent listened, they knew that wasn't the squeaky wheel. Like they weren't spinning on a number. They were spinning on an experience.
Yeah. Yeah.
Timing.
And we talk about value proposition a lot, and value proposition is simply benefits over cost.
Yeah.
So sometimes you can offer benefits that far outweigh any marginal increase or decrease in cost, whether that's our the commission that we are charging, or the commission that we earn, or the price in the sale of an apartment. Sometimes the benefits, to your point, the benefit was a better experience, a cleaner deal, certainty, security, something that was going to get done with a high level of high degree of certainty, and it didn't cost them a dime to do it. And that when you stack on the benefits, even if they really did want their asking price, the benefits far outweigh the difference in cost, and that's how you create a great value proposition.
I mean, and they took any hidden motive off the table when they said, we will, the first buyer, the first potential buyer who was calling in all of these inspectors, kind of holding off on whether they're going to move forward because they're going to probably try to find some wiggle room in that price.
Yeah.
The second buyer said, no ulterior motive, and we'll prove it to you.
That's right.
Where our cards are on the table.
Yep.
Very smart.
And one last thing I'll say on this one, because it is one of the tenets, or it's one of the most important things about collaborative negotiation. We say create value before you claim value. And collaborative negotiation is all about creating a bigger pie, right? Understanding that each side has different interests and needs, and if you can identify the needs and wants of the other side, and you can create exchanges, giving something of lesser value to your side to get something of greater value to your side, what happens is that pie, the value within that pie just gets bigger. And so we say create value before you claim value. And this is a great example of how that agent was able to create value before claiming value.
Right.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's move on.
Let's move on.
This is you. Story number 5.
This is me. Oh, right. So this is a story about, I guess it's about knowing who you're dealing with, knowing who is in charge, and knowing who is making the decisions. I had a rental client, a young girl moving here. She had a great starting salary. She was making more than I was. Like, she was ready to go, and she came in, and we had a meeting, and I explained to her that she did not qualify for the type of apartment she wanted. She did not qualify on her own, but there were options. There's always, the roommate option, but there's also guarantor. Yeah. Or if you're willing to look somewhere else, we could explore that, but otherwise she needed a guarantor.
Moving to New York and getting hit with that 40 to 50 times the monthly rent and a salary
it's big, and it's confusing, and it doesn't make sense if you've never been here. Yeah. And it sometimes doesn't make sense if you've lived here 30 years.
Yeah, exactly.
But those are the rules. And I thought everything went great, and then the next morning I received a call from a very, very angry father who had a lot of things to say to me. And this is actually, I know when we talked about Minnesota Nice, the first, and we're like recovering from it, but one of the positive side effects is that I was able to take a breath and listen to this man, and I thought about it. I was like, well, he's calling me. He's not calling my boss, so he must know that I can help him. But he said, how dare you tell my daughter that she can't get an apartment in New York City? Yeah. And then there were many other words. And when he was finished, I said, let me clarify. I said I never told her she couldn't get an apartment. I told her she doesn't qualify for an apartment in New York, and I told her the options, one of which was a guarantor, which, you and I asked if, her parents could possibly be that. And he said, she's making plenty of money to pay that rent. And I said, oh, don't get me wrong. She's making plenty of money to pay the rent. But in New York, just because you can pay the rent doesn't mean you qualify to get that apartment. And I had to explain that to him. I basically had to start over. It was like Groundhog's Day. I had to start over with a brand new client. Yeah. And I went through the whole process with him. And after explaining it to him, he totally got everything. The difficult thing for me in that was I don't know what their conversation was without me. That game of telephone. Yeah. And it was I have a sister, and I know that she has a different relationship with my parents than I do, and so I don't know what her relationship was with her dad. Maybe she wanted to call him and say, Dad, you got to do this. Yeah. Or maybe she was mad. Maybe she really didn't understand, and I didn't ask. I had to pretend that nothing I told her was given to him. So I had to start all over with him. We did end up finding her an apartment. There was one caveat, which is another thing I didn't ask about. I went through the whole process with him, and he's, because he said, but I'm going to help her. And I said, and that's exactly what we need, but we need paperwork to back that up. Right. That's basically what we need. You say you're going to help her. I believe you. We just need paperwork to back that up and to prove that you're able to do that. And he said, I will do that. He goes, but I don't want to give any of my financials to my daughter. And I said, fine, I can take care of that. And so I was showing apartments to her, but I was doing the deal with him. Yeah. And I didn't ask, like I said, I don't know what happened in that game of telephone. I also don't know what the motives are either way. But she ended up getting what she wanted. She was happy. He was happy. But it was, my deal was done with him. Yeah. And that idea that you uncovered that nugget of, I don't want my daughter to see my finances. It seems like there was a lot of, he was taking a stand, which a lot of our clients do. And you were able to kind of uncover what the area of concern was so that then you could offer options so that he knew that he could do this while also not having to reveal his financial his paperwork, his finances, good or bad, whatever they were, to his daughter. Getting to that point is really important. Getting to that area of concern is really important. Well, that's the listening part. Yeah. Again, I mean, and letting someone have their say, good or bad, and not taking it personally, and coming out with a solution at the end. Yeah, and that the fact that this happens so much with guarantors and if family members of purchasers too. So this is not just a rental thing. This is an every real estate deal thing where you have someone with an interest in the deal, financial or otherwise, and they don't necessarily understand the process, or they believe they understand the process. And if we just tell them this is how it is and ignore the fact that they have their own truth. We talked about this in logic and reasoning, right? They've come to their own conclusion. Mm-hmm. But what assumptions have they made in order to draw that conclusion? If we can address the assumptions, we can change the conclusion. And so by having a conversation with him about those assumptions, about the fact that, yes, she will pay her rent. I'm sure she will pay her rent every month, but that doesn't mean a landlord is going to be willing to rent her an apartment given the guidelines and the qualifications that are required in the city. Right. Yeah. And it's even more difficult for people who are not familiar with or have never lived in New York and don't know that getting an apartment here is very different than getting one anywhere else. Yeah, that's right. That's great. All right, I have one more. Okay. This is a short one. This is a really short one. And it's actually, I wanted to include this because this is an ongoing deal. So I hesitated. I've got a knock on wood somewhere because this is an ongoing deal that's actually happening. But it's a fascinating story about how we leave an impression on people, or how people feel about us and why it matters. And this is a deal that we're about to sign contracts on. And it's friends of mine who are purchasing. They saw an apartment. They went without me when they first saw it.
And they called me from the apartment. They said, you really got to come and see this apartment. We really love it. So we set up an appointment for the next day. And I connected with the listing agent and texted him and said, hey, it's Eirik. I'm not sure if we've ever worked with each other before, because it's in my neighborhood. This is in Jackson Heights. Yeah. It's a close-knit group. So I was like, I don't think we've ever worked together before, but I'm working with my friends and I'll be their agent. He said, great, okay, wonderful. We'll see you tomorrow. So we go to the apartment. They're milling around, looking at the apartment one more time. I pull aside with Rick, the listing agent, to get a little bit more information from him. And he's like, you know what, Eirik? We haven't worked together before, but when you texted me, it pulled up the last time that we texted each other, because it's it's just still on a thread. Mm-hmm. And it was 2 years ago, and you had a listing in the neighborhood, and I had a buyer, and I think that they had changed their appointment a couple of times, but then finally, ultimately, like 5 minutes before an appointment that they had scheduled, he had to call me and cancel. And I responded, as I always do, with grace and with not flying off the handle like some people are want to do. But I said, no problem. I know it happens. I've had buyers like this. I really hope to do a deal with you in the future, and I look forward to meeting you at some point. And so, he had long forgotten that text exchange, but it popped up when I texted him, and he's like, I remember that so well, because I was so impressed by the fact that you didn't make me feel terrible about missing this appointment, or didn't make me feel small about missing this appointment. And he's like, I've always wanted to work with you, do a deal with you ever since that exchange. And here we are, we're doing a deal with each other. And there's no question that he pushed for our deal, knowing that I would be on the other side of that deal.
Right.
Yeah.
Reputation matters.
Reputation matters. Absolutely.
Relationships matter.
Yeah. Yeah. So why don't we do some? That's it. Those are the stories. Well, maybe we'll come back and do this again.
Those are the appropriate stories.
Those are the appropriate stories.
The ones we're allowed.
Yeah, that's right. That's what we're allowed to say. But as Lena mentioned, maybe we come back and do this again. But we actually, it just made me think, we have a hanging thread with the Fair Act. We were supposed to have like a podcast to come back on that one too. So we got a lot of work to do, Jay. You got to start listening.
Well, we have
at
least 2 more. That means.
At least 2 more. Thanks. Great. I get Jay for at least 2 more episodes. Wonderful. All right, so let's wrap it up. When we look at all 6 of the stories that we told today side by side, you start to see the real DNA of negotiation. Whether it's Herb Kelleher redefining value with a bottle of bourbon, an agent earning trust in Park Slope on a Park Slope stoop, or a buyer's agent creating a win-win in Fort Greene. And those are just my stories. I realized that I didn't even include any of yours. Shame on me.
They're my stories. Why would
they're yours. You want to say anything? The through line is not luck. It's awareness. It's knowing when to listen, when to lead, and when to hold steady.
That's right. Because negotiation mastery isn't about control. It's about composure. If someone's dad calls you, it's about composure.
That's right.
If you find out someone has ulterior motives, it's about composure, and it's about how you handle them. And it's about recognizing that true power doesn't come from pressure. It comes from clarity, the ability to read the room, understanding motives, and influence outcomes without forcing them.
And that's what every one of these stories shows us. Great negotiators balance these and many other of these dimensions: empathy, integrity, creativity, clarity, relationship, and confidence. They use empathy to connect, integrity to build trust, creativity to unlock new options, clarity to guide decisions, relationships to open doors, and confidence to stand in their own value.
Because when you operate from that space, calm and collected, prepared, and self-assured, you create successful outcomes that last. And you're not just closing deals, but you are strengthening relationships with those deals. And that's what ultimately is the through line of all of these stories.
Well said. Well said. Well, that is the Shear line, everyone. As a reminder, you can support this show by following us, subscribing, rating, and reviewing the podcast on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. Just go to getmorenetwork.com, and there you can check out all of the amazing shows on the More Network, including past episodes of Shearline. You can find me all over Instagram at archway.partners, as well as on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram Instagram at Eric the Expert. Jay, where can they contact you?
On Instagram at JJ Billiet Interiors. JJ Billiet _ Interiors.
All right. And you can follow my team or connect with my team, the Excelsior team at Brown Harris Stevens, by going to bhsusa.com. And you can connect with my coaching company, Archway Partners Coaching, by visiting archwaypartnersinc.com, where you can find out all about our new Mighty Network community and all of the fantastic small group coaching, Q&As, and resources that we offer there. And remember, everyone, there is a key for every lock, but it's the right combination of grooves, cuts, and teeth that lift the pins and create the shear line. Until next time, keep turning curiosity into connection, mystery into mastery, and keep unlocking what's possible. We'll see you next time, everybody.